Hello, everyone. We'll give just a little bit longer until we start. We'll start right at 2:30 today. All right. I want to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us in our session today on creating a collaborative school culture. This is kind of a part two. We're going to build on our summit from last time. However, if you did not attend that summit, don't worry. We'll do a brief overview so we'll catch you up. Um, and you'll be able to hopefully take some of the tools that we give you today back to your schools. So Taylor put in the chat a note taker. That should have all of the resources that you need for our session today. It's going to have the slide deck. It's also going to have an article that we're going to look at just a little bit later, and the other things that you'll need. So it will force you to make a copy. So go ahead and do that because you're going to be also using it to take some notes during this session. Attendance is going to also be taken during this session. So Taylor is going to put in that attendance form for you. So you have that. And let's get started. So I found this quote on the internet, and it really spoke to me this year and last year. And I know that teaching can be kind of an isolating experience, and sometimes we like that as teachers. Our classroom is kind of our island, but we need to create that collaborative school culture. And as TLFs, you're very well aware of that. And I thought this quote like I said, it spoke to me because we aren't on here just to get through the day or get through the school year, but to actually help each other and carry each other through. So we're hoping that we give you some tools to do that today. And in that regard, last session we looked at a tool by Elena Aguilar, and it's called Mind the Gap. And this just looks at maybe reasons why people don't quite get tasks done or aren't able to step up as sometimes we think they should be. Now, we did go into this in more depth in our last session, and that is available if you're interested in looking at it on our YouTube page. And so you can find that on our TLN Google site. So if you need help with that, let me know. We can get that information to you. So Mind the Gap, as I said, is a tool from our friend Elena Aguilar, who does obviously a lot of coaching work. And Mind the Gap, it reminds us that when we see someone is unable to do something that they maybe want to do, or maybe that we think they should do, we need to look at them as a learner, right? As somebody who requires a set of things in order to complete something, just as we all require that. So we need to take the stance of guiding them as a learner, right? Sometimes we think they're just being resistant. Sometimes they are, but also let's take a look at maybe why they put up that resistance. So I'm going to go through these 6 gaps very quickly today, and then we're going to build on a couple of them. So our first one is that skill gap, right? Do we have what it takes to complete a task? Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. Part of that could be leading into a knowledge gap. As learners, right, we don't want to do something unless we know we have the knowledge that we need to do it. And that happens a lot. So we're constantly learning. We're constantly studying about MLSS and iReady and looking at data. But we have to have that knowledge and able to be to perform. The next one, as you can see, our icon for that is a fuel tank. And this one kind of shows the fuel tank full. And I'm not even sure which is the most negative. Is that if our tank is too full, perhaps we can't take on any more. And if it's empty, that might not be a good thing either. So are we too full, as we all are, of doing too many tasks? These capacity gaps can be both physical and emotional, as we've all felt for these last couple of crazy years. The next one is our will gap. Is this a task that we really want to do? And if it's not, we're probably not going to do it to the best of our ability. On the bottom row, we have the cultural competence gap. And that's kind of a gap that we're always filling, right? We're always learning more about other cultures, bringing those into our classrooms, and constantly is a learning process. So that one is kind of one that personally I feel like we never quite fill, but we keep working. And finally, we have our emotional intelligence gap. And this one is really critically important. And this is kind of the one we're going to build on today. First of all, you want to think about how you express yourself. And then, if through that expression, how we empathize with others. So, as I said, the gaps often overlap. And today, we're going to look at how we can deepen our understanding of that emotional intelligence, which will then help us close our capacity gap. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Amy, and she's going to take us through the next activity.
Thanks, Mary. So we heard loud and clear at the last summit, and just kind of every time we get an opportunity to work with you all, that capacity is a real challenge right now. Everyone seems just overly full and overly stretched. So we want to share this activity for you to be able to do it for yourself or to bring back to your staff to help you address capacity issues. So right now, at the end of the day, you might be looking and feeling like this, inside or outside, I don't know. But what we invite you to do now is either use your note taker or something else that you can write on. And you're going to make a quick list about all the things you've complained about or wanted to complain about in the last week. Big stuff, little stuff, stuff that's happening in your personal life, stuff that's happening in your professional life. Try to include at least 10 items. I have a feeling many of us will not have a problem with that. So just go for it. I will quiet myself so you can get those complaints down. Oh, I should add that no one's going to see these other than you. So just putting that out there. Okay. You may be at like 8.5 complaints. You might be at 15. I don't know what kind of week you have had. I can only imagine. But let's take a moment to stop recording those. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to try to make sense of what to do with all these complaints and issues that are rolling around in our heads and taking up a lot of our emotional and energetical space. Like right now, I wonder how your body's feeling after writing all those down. Like, do you feel like your shoulders are way up here? Like, there's so much it's driving me bonkers. But let's just see what we can do about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to sort these complaints, and we're going to sort them into 3 different categories. The first is, what are the things that are within your control? What's something that you can actually make a decision about that could impact whether or not that stays in your complaint category? I have a lot of times, I'm feeling real tired lately. I could figure out how to make my sleep longer. Like I could figure out how to go to bed early. I could figure out how to sleep in a little later if I prepped my breakfast the night before. So I have some control over that. I would mark my tiredness with a C. There are also things that are probably on your list that are within your influence, where you may need to collaborate with someone else to shift from a complaint to something that's working okay for you, but you might not be able to make that decision completely on your own. I know coming into meetings, I really love a space to be able to ground and talk to people instead of just jumping right into the agenda. So I might talk to the person who's leading the group and say, hey, could we maybe do a grounding activity first? I don't get to make that decision, but I could influence the possibility of something changing. So I'd mark that with an I. Everything else on my list where I have no control and no influence, that's going to get an O because it's out of my control and outside my influence. Last week, the trash collectors came 5 hours earlier than usual, and my trash can wasn't out. I had no control over when they showed up. So that one is out of my control. So go ahead, code your list. Think about how your body feels once you start kind of sorting those out. And let's take a look at what we can do with these complaints now that we have some structure to them. So you're going to find these complaints do fall within these 3 categories. How's your body feel now that you've sorted them? Does it help to think about the things that you actually can control or influence? Maybe, maybe not. So we're going to go through a few different reflection questions, which you could use on your own. You could do, again, this with your staff. And then we're going to go into some breakouts where you can talk about some of these together. So looking at your list, what category did most of your complaints fall into? Of those ones that fell in that sort of red area outside your control, are there any that you can look at differently so you can have more influence over them? Like if I just put my trash out that night before, it wouldn't have mattered what time they showed up the next day because that trash would have been taken away. I can make some decisions in my life so I don't have to deal with some of the complaints that do come up. I can also take a look at some of these and I can think, if it's outside of my control, maybe I can just let it go. That is hard. That is hard for me. It's probably hard for some of you. But something I have found helpful is I do a couple visualizations. One is I think about a bookshelf, and sometimes I think about those complaints and I like put it on the shelf. Just, it's still there, but I don't have to deal with it right now because it's up on the shelf. Another thing I think about sometimes is I put that complaint in a helium balloon and I just watch it fly away. And then that way I don't have to worry about it either. Just see you later, that complaint. I'm not going to put my time and energy into that anymore. Another thing I can do when I'm looking at these complaints is I can think about what's in my sphere of control that I can tackle right now. When you feel like you have the ability, the agency to make change, that really helps with capacity too. Because then you're like, okay, this is something I can do something about. And it kind of gets you regrounded into taking charge of your life and not feeling like all of these things outside of your control are driving you, right? So what we're going to invite you to do now is Taylor's going to drop us into some breakouts. You'll be about 4 or 5 people. Make sure you introduce yourself because I'm sure some of you will be new to one another in that space. And then talk through this activity. How was that for you? Do you feel any different than when you came in? Is this a tool you could use with your staff? How could you imagine that this tool could get used to build a stronger collaborative school culture at your site? And then we'll come back and do a little share out. So I think we'll probably go for about 5 to 7 minutes, Taylor? Yeah? All right. We'll see you all back. All right, we're seeing everyone coming back into the main room. And we're not a very big group, so we can use the chat or you can unmute yourself, whatever you'd like to do. So unmute or use the chat. What came out of your conversations in your breakout? Do you see this as a tool that you could use to support folks in attending to capacity? Keely?
Kylie, sorry. I have 2 different devices because the audio doesn't work on my computer, but it does work on my phone. So I'm just like, problem solving. So it took a second. You can hear me, right? Okay. So one of the big things we came out was the idea that like looking at some of the things we think are out of our control, but reframing what parts of it, like what it really hit me when you said you couldn't control the trash came early, but you could control putting it out the night before. And so one of the big things I was telling my group is that I put it on my list, like my 7th period class. I can have a great day. And by the end of the day, I'm just like, why do I do this? But really coming back and like reframing it. Okay, what needs to happen? Does your curriculum need to be a little bit more engaging? Do you need to start with different icebreakers to get them engaged in the lessons? Do you need to do a better seating chart? Do you need to be calling home more often? Like one of the people in our group said, like sometimes not my circus, not my monkeys, but they are. And how, like, am I not training my monkeys well enough? Am I not feeding my monkeys well enough? Am I not giving my monkeys enough rest? With that saying. So even the things out of my control, sometimes I can reframe them and find the things that are in my control that might help that part. And that was one of the big things that, like, I don't know, your trash can moment was like maybe I'm not doing this. And then another thing that came out was capacity, just so many irons in the fire that, and I, right at the end when it kicked us back out, like that idea that, like, do you guys feel like it's always the same people? It's that like 85-15 principle or whatever. I don't know the numbers on it. It's the reason I'm not a math teacher. But the 85% of the people are doing 100%, or, you know, the work, or like 15% of the people do 85% of the work or something like that. And it's always the same people doing all the things. And we just, lose capacity. Sorry about that. Okay,
No, that's okay. Kylie, thank you. And thank you for correcting me with your pronunciation. Anyone ever, please do that, because I do want to be able to say people's names correctly. So yeah, sometimes reframing does help us kind of readjust, and it can take a seemingly impossible situation. It can make it seem more possible. Anything else that came out of your groups before we move into the next piece? Okay. Oh, Mr. Yoder.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this is really, really good, because it's really easy, not just ourselves, but all teachers in general, for us to get into a negative spiral, and just basically figure out a way to make it, what she was saying about reframing is brilliant, because otherwise everything's out of your control. And then that's the worst feeling in the world, to feel like you can't do anything to make your situation better. So thank you.
You're welcome. Trying to control the things you can't control. Our time, our energy is infinite to be able to do that. I mean, not infinite. Ooh, our energy is finite. Sometimes we wish it was infinite. Okay, so we're going to transition now into taking a look at how you can leverage the emotional intelligence component around empathy to be able to fill your cups, build your capacity.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I love what you guys are saying, and this idea that, you know, sometimes we do have too many irons in the fire, right? And I think when we can use a tool like that to kind of prioritize what we have control over and let go of some of those things, we know they're going to drive us incessantly crazy because we're teachers and we're perfectionists by nature. But anytime we have that opportunity to kind of let something go or reframe it in a way that maybe lets us not be so bothered by it, is a great opportunity. So like Amy said, we're going to be looking at empathy and how we can utilize strengthening our emotional intelligence. We know that when we strengthen our emotional intelligence, we have a bigger capacity to take on more. So it kind of helps fill that capacity gap for us and take some of that pressure off of us when we have higher emotional intelligence. So one of the strongest tools within emotional intelligence is empathy. So today we're going to be looking at an article. It comes to us from ASCD, an issue titled Leading Together. And this article is called We're Not Okay and That's Okay. So I'm going to give you guys the next 5 minutes to independently read this article. When we come back together, we're going to talk about some discussion questions and ways we can further deepen what we take away from this article in our small groups. And so I'm going to pop that article in the chat for you guys so you have easy access to it. It's also in your note taker. You can turn off your camera and we'll come back together in 5 minutes to talk about discussions. Okay, I'm going to bring us back together. I hope you guys enjoyed your spa music while you read the article. we're we're going to jump into some discussions now, and we're going to be using those three main chunks from the article and looking at ways we can invite, listen, and then take action with empathy as a tool. So these questions are centered around ways you might already be utilizing empathy and ways that we could or might choose to bring in additional practices or things we could be doing at our school site. So there are 6 questions here. We invite you to kind of pick something that resonates with you. Obviously, we want this to be an organic conversation. So if your conversation needs to steer in a different direction, these are here for you to use as a guide, but you are not tied to them. So go where you need to with the conversation. We're going to give you guys about 18 minutes or so in these breakout rooms. And when you're in there, you'll be with the same group, and we're going to come back together after that time, and we're going to just do a quick share out. It always amazes me the things we come up with that we can share and learn from each other. So come back with something to share with the group. I'm going to open those breakout groups now, and let us know if you need anything.